everyone. Welcome to Appliance Advisors with Yale Appliance. My name is Francesco, joined as always by Dennis McDonald, VP of Sales here at Yale. How you doing today, Dennis?
Doing great, Fran. How about you?
Very good, very good. You ready to start answering a lot more appliance questions here today?
Hop into it as always.
All right, we got a lot to cover today, so let's hop right in. Sure. So first question, we're going to kind of start off with laundry here. So something we've kind of talked about, and obviously, really one of the most common questions we get, period, specifically on laundry. Hybrid versus top load. What is the difference between a hybrid top load and a regular top load machine with an agitator? What are those differences?
Okay, so let's just break down for everybody that may or may not actually be looking for laundry so they understand the concept. Kind of what we all grew up with, just that top lifting set of laundry or top loading laundry. That's what we always had, that had the big corkscrew. That was always the standard as we were growing up, and still today is out in the market. Then we got to the point where we wanted something slightly more efficient because front loaders came out. So the top loader started to be under siege a little bit, because what front loaders give you, because they don't have that big agitator in the middle for a long time, was a little more more capacity and a better story in terms of water consumption. Yeah. So the market introduced what we would call a hybrid unit, which basically is a top loading unit. It just removed that corkscrew agitator that was inside. And lack of a better term, it really put an impeller inside. Almost, if you were to look inside one, it would kind of look like a boat prop, like that small prop at the bottom of it. Good concept, bigger capacity, fast spin speed, so better drying or less time in the dryer. So it had some advantages. The one thing that it does not do, and you're hearing it here, 1000% correct. And if any appliance salesperson across the country is telling you they work, give them my personal phone number and I will yell at them, because they simply put do not work. Yeah. If you're a servicing company, you know this. They do, because what a laundry machine needs to do is it needs agitation and it needs to turn the clothes, that tumbling effect. And that's what a agitator model did. While a bit crude and a little tough on your clothes, because that corkscrew is just grabbing your clothes and dragging it up that propeller, but then it turns it back down to the bottom of the machine. And that motion of clothes rubbing against each other, as well the agitator being pulled to the top of the tub and then pushed back down, that action is what got clothes clean. The hybrid models remove that agitator, so that just can't happen. Now, manufacturers make claims all day long that they do. The difference at Yale is we test them, and we put cameras on them, and we put a tub full of white towels in it, and we'll put one red item, bright red item, and we wash it. So we can actually truly see. We should see that red item going from the bottom to the top and turning over. Simply put, they don't. Yeah. So as much as they want to make the claims, they don't. So what we tell people is this: top load laundry is fine. And actually, there's been people that have tried both, and some people are just, whether it's for a space consideration or just they seem to like a top load machine for a bunch of other reasons, they're fine. But I would tell anyone to buy a model at that point, if that's the way you're going to go and you're not doing front loading, buy one with an agitator. They have come out, they're bigger now. There's some that have large capacity, are a little more load sensing in terms of water consumption. So there's some good units out there, but really you want to wash the clothes in a washing machine, not just throw perfume in it with detergent. You want to clean the material. So that's the difference. And I also, you just asked for the difference, and I gave you a full personal opinion on how I feel. I was pretty hot there for a minute.
But that's the difference. You got it. I would definitely say, laundry is one of these categories that there's so many crazy features out there, but you want it to clean first and foremost. So if the machine's not going to do that, then that's number one. And we always tell people too on those, because it looks like, you look at this thing and there's no agitator in it. It's like, wow, this is huge. Yeah. But you still need to load it as if it was an agitator.
I have a couple of friends that thoroughly enjoy doing laundry. It's cathartic. They really can put on their headphones, and that's kind of what they do, and tune the kids out or whoever they're trying to tune out, or just their world, and they kind of enjoy it. But for the rest of us, we kind of all hate laundry, right? It's kind of like we want to do it and get as much of it done at one time and not ruin a Saturday or some be doing it all the time. And that's why it's so appealing for people to see these massive units without an agitator in the middle, because they do look enormous. They're big.
Yeah.
They're not bigger than any front load units, by the way, or most front load units. But for a top loader, they really look big. When you look down, you see this big open drum. But at the end of the day, do you want speed or do you want clean? I mean, only you can answer that, So.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
Well, I think that was a good explanation of the differences there, with some personal opinions thrown in. We love it.
We don't know any other way here at Yale.
That's right.
We're probably going to tell you what we think, because we service it. We know the problems.
Absolutely. So that's great. All right, next question. Moving on to refrigeration. So built-in refrigerations like Sub-Zero. So this is a question from a customer here, or someone that's out of our area. But I need to replace my Sub-Zero, but can't wait a year. Are there any options? By the way, I don't live in your area.
Okay. Yeah, so happy to help if we can out there. Sub-Zero, certainly a good brand. People want it, but it's running, close to a year across the country if you were to order one today. And a lot of people had Sub-Zeros that lasted 20, 25 years. So, naturally they may want another one, and everything's set up for it. Brands like Thermador and whatnot do not easily retrofit. Like, you could get lucky. We have custom installers that could do some of the work to make the space conceptually, or you could have contractors do that. But it's just not plug and play. And what I mean by that is the water connections. If you have an ice maker, they're in different areas potentially for where a Thermador would require it, or most brands actually, not just Thermador, 99% of the brands. So you'd have to do some modifications, maybe to some plumbing. Electrical could be in a different spot. The opening width could be a half-inch difference, but that's not easy to just cut cabinets a half-inch when you think about a refrigerator opening. So there's some limitations, but there is a brand, GE Monogram, will retrofit into that same space. Genair does as well, but in terms of when we're really looking at product and we're saying, what's a product very similar probably in style, feature, a Monogram will retrofit into the space, and the electrical and plumbing's in the exact same spot. So easy in and out. So kind of it's a good brand to consider if you're in that case where your fridge has died, you can't wait for the Sub-Zero, you have to have it retrofitted. Monogram could be a really good option for you to think about.
All right, very good. Good tips. All right, so next few questions, we're kind of going into plumbing here. So we're talking about sinks first. And when I'm looking for a sink or just buying a sink, whether, new model, new construction, what kind of things do we look for? What questions should we be asking? What do I need to know when I'm buying a sink?
Yeah, buying a sink, honestly, people are like, wait a minute, you're an appliance store, you're talking about sinks. We happen to sell a lot of sinks. Primarily because, honestly, folks, we do care about the design, and you should. It's your kitchen, right? Or your customer's kitchen. But we know the sink is in the center of most runs of cabinets, and generally not at the ends. They're somewhere in the middle. Even if it's on an island, if it's on a back wall, it doesn't matter, but it's somewhere stuck between a lot of other cabinets. So the first thing is, how big a sink do you need? How do you use it? Do you like the faucet in the rear of the sink? Do you want something that's square, or do you want something that we used to call it like a on its side D-bowl shaped, or there's different shapes? The trend is absolutely the bigger rectangular style sinks. That's absolutely probably 90% of what we sell. Do you want an apron front sink? Do you like that maybe more classic look where you actually see the front of the sink? So those are things just aesthetically what you want to see. And then think about how you use it and what drives you nuts about your current sink, because a sink is not an appliance, but it's a super important piece in the kitchen. When you entertain is when you enjoy your kitchen or don't. And if you can't fit the pots and pans and things like that you cleaned during when you had company over, and your sink's too small and can't kind of house some of that, because we think about the dishwashers running, maybe it's a holiday for you or a party, and now all your stuff's kind of piling out of the sink, or it can't fit, and now it's all over your counter. That's stressful because people hang in the kitchen. You have islands, all these things that's a gathering spot. So we tell people a lot of times, consider a bigger kitchen, a bigger rectangular sink. And as a real running average, cabinet sinks come in 3-inch increments. So 24, 27, 30, 33, 36, and keep going. The trend is a large, big single bowl sink. And we generally tell people start with a 36-inch sink base. If you do a 36-inch sink base, you can pretty much, there are a couple of exceptions, pretty much fit 98% of all large single bowl sinks, regardless of the brand. So if you kind of start with that and then lay out all your other cabinets to the left and right of it, you learn to live with that space. If you start off and you don't ask that question initially, and you start out your design with a very small cabinet base because you never discussed it with the designer, then what you end up doing is falling in love with all these cabinets. Now you go to buy yours and your plan's 99% done. You're all excited and you bought your appliances, you're ready to go, and then you're like, oh, and I need a sink. That's kind of how this goes. And then we show them, oh, well, how big is your sink base? How big is that sink, the cabinet that can house it? And you tell us 24 inches or 27 inches. And we say, okay, you ready to find your one or two options? And most people walk up and go, ooh, that's way too small. That's what I have. I want something a little bigger. And now guess what has to happen? You got to go back to the drawing board on everything. And it gets very emotional because people have already ordered their spice rack for this cabinet here. So I always say, start bigger, learn to love. And then if you find a sink that's a little smaller that you like, well, then great. We just made some of those other cabinets a little bigger. No one will be upset with few more cabinets. That makes sense to you, Fran. That's kind of where I always say to start. And then after that, it's aesthetic and things like that. But start with the right
definitely. Yeah, it's one of those things too. We always say it's one of those things you definitely want to at least think about it and have some input into, and not just kind of one of those things to take whatever these people are giving you because down the line, most things that are in your kitchen, they're easily replaced. At the end of the day, 3-4 years from now, you really want to get a different dishwasher or a different range, so you can do that. The sink is really difficult to replace. You're kind of stuck with that ultimately until you're doing a full renovation at that point. So it is a really important thing to think about and make sure you are kind of considering.
And then I'll just tell you this, depending on the age of the kitchen, remember, double bowl sinks were popular in the 80s, in the early 90s. And that's kind of what a lot of the kitchens we're redoing are about time to be done. So if you have a double bowl sink, I'm going to ask you two things to know. Why do you have a double bowl sink? Do you truly use a second sink? Most people tell me that they use it as a glorified scraping hole for their disposal. And then I start to ask about, okay, how do you enjoy that? Do you have water spilling all over the counter? Is it awkward to get a plate? And all those answers, I already know them. I'm setting you up to think. And the reality of it is, yeah, it does. Water gets everywhere. I really don't soak anything in it. And now my main sink still isn't big enough for maybe that roasting turkey. I cooked the turkey and I can't put the roasting platter in the sink, so now it's on my counter. So if you were to ask me, for 99% of people, they want a large single bowl sink. That's really what they want, because when they have a lot of people, they want to bury a lot of stuff in it. They want to be able to soak stuff in it, and they want to be able to, and that's kind of the way we see the trend going. Someone asked here, Nate Yagel has asked, farmer sink versus regular undermount, pros and cons. Farmer sink, they can come in a variety of finishes now. Most common, you see a porcelain enameled white or a porcelain enameled, right? So classically, you can just picture white, but now they come in all different colors. And then you see some stainless steel farmer sinks, okay? The trend, absolutely, at least in our New England market, because we're definitely a little more traditional out here, or transitional, is a white fire clay sink, and they make a few different styles. You can get them that they're more modern and clean, or a bit chunkier and look kind of big. The brand absolutely there, I will tell you, is Shaw. That is the brand that really most everyone that really does a lot of research does, because Nate, you asked the question, what's the pros and cons? The cons to most farmer sinks are the material porcelain, right? And I see you asking that next question. So I'm getting there, Nate. Trust me, I'll answer it. I think porcelain's great, but porcelain can chip. So people don't like to see, if you had a white sink and now all of a sudden you have a black mark, or see a chip, how do you replace the chip? Well, they sell repair kits, but it's like you have a scratch on your car. We're not auto body technicians. It's not a perfect repair, right? So why I say Shaw, if you're going to do a porcelain sink, and they come in a couple different colors, but if you're going to do that, that's that chip. They have a couple of styles, but really known for that thick. It's truly made from fire clay. So it's literally made and baked in a kiln for 40 hours. So a kiln is just like you do in pottery. And the more time it spends in a kiln, the harder and more dense the material becomes. Where most manufacturers, Kohlers and the rest of them, they're dunking the sink. They're trying to get raw production and speed out of that factory. Where with a brand like Shaw, it's a 40-hour process, but it can chip, but it is much more resistant to chipping than any other brand out there. So that is why that brand kind of owns it. In terms of other materials, there are stainless steel fire clay sinks, and it's fine. But can scratch easily. And then again, just needs to go with the style and design. We tend to see that more in the more modern or definitely more modern contemporary kitchens. But we don't sell lots and lots of them. And then there's all these other types of proprietary materials out there that are almost like bead blasted, or they're some type of almost like an epoxy kind of on the front of it. And it can look matte, it can look shiny, and those are fine. The only thing I'm telling you is it is absolutely very trendy, right? And when you do a fire clay sink, or you do an apron front sink, you're not replacing it. Those cabinets are cut custom to that sink. So you really want to make sure that if you're going to put yourself out there and kind of get outside, and I love it, but you're going to get out there with some of these new age materials and colors and things like that, is this a house you're going to stay in? And if you're not, when you go to sell it, is someone going to walk in and love it? Because it's not easy to replace. And someone may point that out in a resale. Sometimes we do what we love today, and you're doing a kitchen, but you're not going to be here in 5 years. And then you go to sell it and you have this beautiful kitchen, but some buyer walks in and is looking at the square foot price in your town and says, I love everything about this home, but man, that sink is really modern or not my style. And that's not going to be easy to replace. So you really got to think about that. Okay. Michael at 6185 asked, should induction cooktops be vented? You don't have to. I think every cooktop should be vented, personally, for a lot of reasons. For just health, combustibles in your kitchen, smoke, and grease and whatnot all across the home. Cooking products put that out there. Any cooktop, regardless to gas or electric or induction. That having said all that, Michael, if the question is you can't vent, induction is pretty good. Because the one thing it is very fast to a boil, so very efficient. So think about a gas burner or a regular electric burner. That could take 5, 10, 15 minutes to bring a stock pot, say, or anything to a boil or a really high heat if you want it to be. So all those fumes, if it's gas, combustibles, or that energy and heat of an inefficient electric burner is taking a long time to heat up. Well, it's also heating your space, right? So the kitchen gets hot, so on and so forth. In this case, the induction cooktop, very, very fast, almost like a light switch. So you're up quick and down quick. So there should be less smoke in your space. That's kind of the idea. Okay. So hopefully that answered your question. I think you should.
Ventilation definitely. With ventilation too, it's one of those things. You can ask that question. It's like for code or for performance, and for really living and using the product, and technically by code with induction in certain areas you don't need it, but like you said, absolutely you should have it for performance and health and all those things. It's definitely much better. All right, so next question, kind of sticking with cooking, but installation, and something that we've noticed a change over the years with ranges and how they install. So specifically on slide-in ranges, it seems like all the newer models install differently than the older ones. What's different? What has changed over the years? And what do I need to know if I'm replacing a slide-in range that maybe I purchased 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, so let's talk about the word slide-in, right? So when we talk today, there's really three main technically four style of ranges. Freestanding, which is the clock and the knobs are in the rear of the stove, right? Just think about that. Had that big back in the rear. It's a huge part of the market, but that's called freestanding. The next was slide in. So what that did is it put the controls at the very front of the stove. And in years past, or up until this point, that was the most common style of the higher end looking stoves. And what it did is it overlaps the counters. So your counters would actually literally wrap right around the back of it. So it gave that kind of built-in look, and it put the knobs at the front so you weren't reaching over the back. So that was the style. Trade-off to that is anytime you had to replace it, no two slide-ins had the same amount of gap in counters at the rear of the stove. So remember, the sides flanged over the top of the counters, looks really kind of built in, but in the back, it also left a gap, and your design was to leave your counters, whether they were laminate, Corian, granite, whatever you had, solid surface, It would just be that strip in the back was unique to that exact model and that brand. So that stove lasts 7 years and then or 8 years, and then something happened and you wanted to replace it or it died. And now you got to buy a new one. And guess what? You now either have to cut that back piece down or, oh, worse, it's bigger now. And your counters have been in for 8 years. So you can't easily retrofit it. So what you've seen the migration to is what is now called front controlled range. Okay. So stay with me. Control still in the very front. There are a couple that do overlap the sides. I don't have a strong feeling. But now it does not have the clock in the rear, so it gives that high-end kind of clean look. But it goes all the way to the rear of the wall. So there is no gap you have to worry about. You don't have to have custom counters put in the back, or God forbid you didn't like it, or you needed to replace one. You just knew you could slide anything in and out. So it really took the best of all worlds. It took the fact that it could be pushed to the rear of the stove without a customized counter behind it. And it gave you a high-end looking feel, and it had replaceable options down the road. Yeah. So if you're someone that owns a classic stove that we would call freestanding, that has the clock and the buttons in the rear of the stove, you absolutely could dress up your kitchen tomorrow without any modifications to counters and cabinets. You don't want to do any of that. We could slide that stove out. You could slide in one of these front control style ranges, and now all of a sudden everything looks really clean. That's a simple thing, right? But if you think about a lot of those people that have that style stove have a microwave above. So if we were to remove all that space, it's about almost 10 inches of space on a running average for the clock and the knobs behind the stove. If you were to remove that, everything now starts to seem a little more open and custom. It's a simple little thing, but you can dress up an older kitchen and kind of have a new feel just by that simple thing. And then the next natural question is, all right, so Yale, are you pitching an expensive stove? No, really not. They have come so far down. Of course, you can spend money. There's some really great ones with some cool features, but it's almost started to replace that freestanding style that had the clock and the knobs in the rear. You're seeing most brands only make 1 or 2 options. And everything's migrated to this front control style range where it's clean looking and it's pushed to the rear. So the cost, because there's so much mass of sales now, the cost has come way down. So you have a great range. You can get something really, really fancy, or something just has a really good look. Maybe not all the bells and whistles of the higher end models, but still gives you that clean look. So it's really that's a trend. Front control is almost becoming the standard now. And then that slide-in style really started to get dated, because now people started saying, wait a minute, I don't want to buy the slide-in. I'm now nervous about that gap and having these custom counters in the rear. So you're seeing, it's not even a prediction. There's only one brand really kind of still doing it, but in the next 12 to 24 months, there won't be any brands. Everything will be front control ranges.
All right, very good. Thank you for that. So next question is going to be our obligatory weekly question regarding appliance lead times and supply chain crises here. So just an update. We're looking for an update here. Has there been any changes in appliance lead times? How far in advance should customers be ordering?
Yeah. So still really too early. I will share maybe some light, but not that we're going to feel it tomorrow, but it's good for everybody if it could continue. Like you said, the inflation, rising mortgage costs, all those types of things have kind of slowed some things down. Granted, it's in the rears. The biggest thing, though, is containers that most manufacturers are bringing a lot of this product comes from China, or the parts and pieces come from overseas. But a lot of times it is China. And those containers, just a month and a half, 2 months ago, to put a container on, which, just to give you perspective, a container might hold 28 refrigerators. Okay, chock full. Now that container used to cost $2,800 to ship. Mm-hmm. About a month and a half ago, it was $28,000 to ship. Why are appliances going up? Well, because they have to absorb that some. There's only 28 fridges in there. Every fridge just jumped $1,000 just in freight. Forget parts, right? So now we're seeing those average container costs coming down closer to $12,000, $10,000, $12,000. Now, if anyone's asking, do they think that means sales tomorrow or prices are going to come down? The answer to that is no, because there is still so much headwind in cost. But what that does mean are a lot of the widgets and pieces that before didn't make sense to ship because that container was costing 28 grand will now start to slowly ease a bit. And I think the manufacturers will start to pay to ship those containers. And those are some of the most painful things: hoods, cooktops. We just talked about those parts, pieces, widgets, the things they need. So is that permanent? Is that a small placebo effect of the market going up and down? Maybe. Too early to tell, but that's kind of some good news. But with that good news, we still continue to get bad news. I mean, we had 3 brands have price increases in the last week. So I think there's lasting effects. We're certainly not out of the woods yet, and the lead times are still really bad for us. But there are some glimpses of hope in there if you really want to see to it. And we need some hope. So we try to see those things and say, hey, maybe there's some good news, down the way, but down the way would still be okay.
All right, very good.
I want to answer some quick questions here.
Absolutely. I was going to say we can definitely end it with these questions.
Yeah, we're going to scrap some of the ones from last week that came in. Not that they weren't important, but these are kind of live. So DA Jokers 1, best 36-inch gas pro style slide-in range, novice chef, recommendations from the Louisiana market. So a pro style 36-inch range, the questions would be this, how do you use it? First off, the first way to do it would be, are you doing all gas? So that means a gas oven with a gas top, or are you wanting to do a gas top with an electric oven called dual fuel? That's a big, dual fuel is going to be universal, bakes better, definitely more precise to the degree, and a little more universally even throughout the oven, where a gas stove might broil better and may roast a bit better, but not quite as good to the precision. You can bake with it, but not quite as good to the precision. But where you say like a novice chef, you may want to consider that. If you're doing all gas, like you answered, certainly the number 1 all gas range we sell, there's 2 today, which is definitely probably a Thermidor and a Wolf, probably 1 and 2. I think there's a ton of great brands out there, though, honestly. All gas is a pretty simplified system. So I think brands you could consider there, definitely Fisher Paykel, SKS, Monogram. I think those would all be good potential options. Blue Star is another one you should really probably consider if it's in your market. Blue Star for a chef has a crazy burner story, really more like restaurant style burners that might be interesting to you. So I think those would all be good options. Other than that, the final question for you would be, do you want it to be self-cleaning or not? Because there are some that are still non-self-cleaning. The benefit to that is it might save you a few dollars. The downside to that is you have to manually clean it by hand. So just think about that.
And one other real thing to touch on real quick there too is on some of, you're talking about some of the combinations up top, like can you get gas and induction, and there is definitely more coming out like that, like SKS, Thermidor has some options too. But what you find too is that, once you add that induction on the top, typically you're looking at dual fuel because of the power that's needed with those to power the induction on the top also. So just a heads up on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us kind of to Vin B asked the question, is there such a thing as a dual fuel dual type cooktops, meaning induction on some burners and electric on others, or some combination? So backing up, yes, it's a deeper question. Yeah. There are in pro ranges, never electric burners. Those burners are always induction burners. So you absolutely, brands like SKS, brands like Fisher Paykel, they absolutely have combination tops where you have gas burners and then you'll have some induction burners. Okay, so that's number 1. Sticking with that pro range, but now you don't need the whole range. You just want the top. You can do what's called a range top. Many people call it a cooktop, but a range top means if you think about looking at a professional range like an SKS or a Fisher Paykel or a Wolf or a Thermidor or a Viking or whatever brand and chop the oven part off. So the knobs are in the front. They wrap around the front of your counter. They come down your counter a little bit, wrap in the front. Those do have tops that have gas and induction. When you get to what we consider a true cooktop, which means your counters surround the piece in the middle. So there's going to be counters in the front, counter in the back, all the way around. It's cut out and dropped into your counter. Fran, you can chime in here. Mm-hmm. I don't know of anyone that is a combination, truly in a one-piece combination unit in a cooktop.
Not in a cooktop.
But what a lot of people might do, if that's something you want, it's not uncommon. There's a thing called hobs. Yeah. And what a hob is, there's 2 ways to do this. A bunch of ways to do this. A hob Brands that have hobs is varying brands. Brands like Jenn-Air will have them, Wolf has them, Gaggenau has them, Miele has them. There's a bunch of brands. These are generally 12 or 15-inch individual units, and you can put them together modularly, and you can really pick. I mean, then you can get fun. There's everything from wok burners to teppanyaki burners to just straight electric burners. There are induction burners, there's gas burners. So you kind of dream it up and you piece them together, and they can be dropped in, and they can be cobbled to look like one unit or intentionally 2 or 3 or 4 units, okay? I've seen a lot of other people say, you know what, I want a classic 4-burner gas cooktop, okay, just an all one-piece cooktop with 4 burners. And then, you know, I'm not sure what I want to do, but you know what, I'm going to take a risk. And they cut in just one hob of maybe an induction or electric burner and put it off to the side. So we have seen that. So you can go all one brand and match. We see some people mix it up and kind of break them up intentionally. We see a lot of people do pro ranges or a range in their house. They have just a range and all in one, oven below, cooktop up top. They're not sure they're going to love something like induction. So they say, you know what, give me a gas stove. That's what I want. But I am going to put this induction cooktop over here to the side and cut it into the counter, maybe a foot or 2 away. So you can do it. You got to get a little bit, not even creative. You just got to make sure you're with the store that has those brands. There's a fair amount of them now. There really are.
All right, excellent. So I think that's going to wrap it up for today. A lot of great questions from the audience. We always appreciate those. So thank you for that. And as always, join in next week, next Thursday at 4 o'clock for another episode of Appliance Advisors. Thank you, Dennis. And we'll see you guys next week.
Awesome. Thank you, friend. See you next week.
See you, everyone.
Bye-bye.